The Leica SL3 is a camera that you need to pick up to actually understand its strengths. What do I mean by that? Let's talk about it right now. Now, full disclosure on this video, I was flown out to Wetzlar to experience the SL3 about 2 weeks ago. We're not paid or sponsored for this video in any way, shape, or form, right? Leica has no say in what I think about the camera, my approach to it, my thoughts only. Then in addition to that, I actually took a second trip to Solden, Austria with Hyundai for their driving experience out there to test drive the all-new Ioniq 5N and the new Tucson. And as well, and Leica Singapore was very kind enough to allow me to take the SL3 and a couple lenses to experience that. So big thanks to them. But these are my thoughts. And with that, we're gonna talk about this camera system because if you look at the specs on paper, it's not like anything we haven't already seen. We've reached a point in the mirrorless camera market that we're very mature in this marketplace. All cameras are really good. It just depends on your needs, your preferences. You like the design, the build quality, the image quality. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, look, for example, the Fujifilm X100VI is like sold out all over the world. Is it the best camera? Some could say arguably not, but it fits a need for a lot of people out there. And the SL3 is kind of one of those cameras where you actually have to get into your hands, use it, experience it, understand the ecosystem behind it, and then you appreciate what it's designed to be. It's not designed to be the only camera that's gonna be in your arsenal, especially if you're a sports photographer, wildlife photographer, or anybody that needs a certain level of speed and accuracy. This may not be the camera for you, and that's fine. Leica is not expecting it to be. But if you're a lifestyle photographer, somebody out there who is looking to capture moments in time and life and, you know, travel around the world and capture beautiful mountains or capture cars drifting in the snow like I was, or moments in the trip from going up into a snowcat or, you know, sitting out there freezing, listen to these instructors in sub-0 degree weather, talk to us about how to drive a car, that's where this camera really shines. And it shines in a variety of different ways. Some of the improvements that over the SL2 and SL2S respectively. I have my reporter right here, so we'll talk about the comparisons to that. But overall, just the functionality of the camera system and how seamless it is between UI and camera body. Because sometimes when you use these mirrorless camera systems out there, it feels like the user interface department is working on a different camera system than the design department is. And they try to merge the two together, and it's not as cohesive as we would like it to be. But the SL3 feels very much like an iPhone where the software is designed for the device, and that's the best way I can really kind of put into words of how this camera feels to use. Now let's talk about the build quality and some of the differences on the system. This is about 10 to 15% smaller than the SL2, SL2S respectively, and it is a bit lighter. The reason being is it's primarily made of magnesium alloy. So the top plate, which is aluminum here on the SL2S, that's gone. It is all magnesium alloy. Even though it looks very similar, you are gonna notice that there's a bit of a weight difference. And also the width of the camera is a little bit more narrow. And this is something that a lot of people were feeding back to Leica saying, can you make a smaller camera? Because they wanna put it onto a gimbal, they wanna take it into a bag. And I can tell you right now with this camera system, even with this and the 35 Cron right here, non-oppo by the way, let's say put this into a small bag like this Wattencraft here, this Rider bag, right? Now this is a nice looking bag here, but if I put this camera body and lens, that's all I can fit inside of it. Now with the SL3, I don't have it with me, I had to go back to Leica by the way, you can actually probably put 2 lenses inside there with the body and have room because of the design of the camera system. Also, the ergonomics feel a lot better. It is smaller, more compact. It still has that same really good grip, but the ergonomics do feel really good in the hand, especially when you're using smaller lenses. Now, if you're using larger lenses, and I tried it with the 500mm f5.6, it still feels really good. There is a new vertical grip that does come with it, and I like the design of it. It's more compact, more sleek, and it's something I would definitely pick up if I'm gonna get the SL3 because I want that extra battery life first and foremost, but sometimes I wanna go out there and shoot with longer lenses, and it's gonna give you better stability in that regard, but even if you don't have it, it's still a really good feeling system. Now on top of the SL3, we have a new dial on the left-hand side, and that is for the ISO. Primarily, you can customize it however you want to, but Leica's theory is they want to have all the controls on the outside of the camera system, even on the touch display, which we'll talk about in just a second, so you don't need to dive into the menu system anymore. Once you've set up your camera once, you are good to go. There's different profiles you can create, there's various different settings you can tap onto the screen to bring the drop-down menu to select items that you would where previously you would have to go inside on the menu system, now it's all out there. And this dial here is actually a really nice attribute, and to me it sort of balances out the entire look of the camera from an aesthetic standpoint. Now, some of the concerns from photographers that were trying the camera was, would you accidentally knock the ISO dial and knock your ISO out? If you're using auto ISO, it's a little bit more difficult because you can turn it in a different direction to sort of unlock features. With your manual ISO, it can get knocked, I guess you could say, but it's not a very loose dial. So there is some tension to it. So I would say for the most part, you're gonna be fine. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something to take note of. There is no sort of physical lock on the dial, which maybe there'll be some sort of firmware update. They can give it like some sort of digital lock, who knows, but it is what it is. And I actually prefer it, and it does make it a lot easier to use. Also, one of the other big differences is on the back of it. There's a power button on this. It's a rubber power button that lights up. And when I first saw the SL3, I was like, this does not feel very Leica-like. You know what I mean? Leica is always about switches and knobs and really, tactile buttons. And this is like a rubber transparent button that glows, it lights up in different colors. Red if you're charging the camera, recording as well, white when you know that it's on. It does go green sometimes. So it does change colors depending on what you're using it for. But I will let you know this, just a little bit of a tidbit on this, is that when you do bring it up to your eye, the light turns off, so it's not gonna get into your eye or any sort of distraction in that way. So that's very cool what Leica did. But after I got to using it for a period of time, I like that it's very quick to put the camera to sleep, tap it again to wake it up. Yes, a switch can do that, but I feel like this is a little bit easier and a bit faster to use overall. And I do like the visual cues that I get from it. So I know that if I'm recording, I know that if I'm charging my camera, I don't have to look for a little small light on the end of it. I can see it right there on the back. So I appreciate that. Flip up display. Yes, we saw it in the Q3 and it is now in the SL3. And this display is a higher resolution than the SL2, SL2S respectively, slightly higher, and you're gonna notice it using it. And it's also touch enabled throughout. The menu, the icons, or they call them Leicons, around the outside of the display are all touch enabled. So it does make it a much more intuitive experience. And we're gonna talk about the UI because this is one of the big upgrades of this camera system that make it really a joy to use, especially if you are into sort of a more modern interface. Case in point, they have reduced the lines on the menu from, I believe it was 6 down to 4 or 5, thereabouts. So they're larger, so they're easier for you to touch even with gloves. And also, as I mentioned, the icons on the outside of it, you can touch those icons to bring drop-down menus to open up separate functionality. Now, there is one that's missing, and that is in terms of the type of autofocus that you want. You want subject detection, animal detection, field, spot, etc. That you would have to assign to one of the function buttons on the camera system. But outside of that, everything that you would want in there is pretty much on the outside of the display. Now let's talk about the big boy in the room. Phase detect autofocus is finally in the SL3. We first saw it in the Q3. We knew it was going to come to this camera system, and it is here. Now, in terms of the performance of the autofocusing, to compare to the Q3, now I tried the Q3 when it was pre-production or almost close to production, and I found the Q3 obviously faster than the Q2, but I did find it to be a little bit nervous, the way that it was searching for autofocusing points, and sometimes it would be bang on, and sometimes it would just be jumping all over the place. I find the SL3 to be a lot more calmer, it feels a little bit more mature. Is it gonna be the same as a Nikon or Canon or Sony camera? No. Is it very similar to the S5 IIX from Lumix? Very similar to that. I would say that they're neck and neck for the most part. This does have animal detection. It is beta, as they mention it. I don't know why, but it does work to some degree. But primarily, I tried it with people, and I just say it does work very well with faces and eyes. For the most part, if you're shooting a crowd of people, it will focus on the face or the person that is favoring the camera first and foremost. And then from there, you just tap on the joystick to move to another person, and it just changes very quickly, and you can move back to however you want it to be. So I was very impressed with the subject detection overall. There are some hits and misses with any autofocusing system, but for Leica, this is a big, big step up. And I think a lot of you out there are gonna rely more on subject detection than you did in the past. Now let's talk about battery life on this, because there is a new battery. It is the upgraded battery that we saw in the Q3 is now in the SL3. You can use your older batteries from the SL2 and SL2S. However, you will get a warning sign on the display that says that some functionality will not be compatible because of this battery. You need the higher capacity battery. And I guess it's gonna come into video performance, etc. So that's where, yes, if you have a previous SL2, SL2S batteries and you wanna use it with this, well, depends how you wanna use it. If you just wanna use it for manually focusing your M lenses, you should be fine. If you wanna use this as a video specific camera that wants to take advantage of higher bit rates or codecs in 4K or 8K, you're gonna have some issues probably with that battery, so keep that in mind. Speaking of video for a second, let's talk about that. The video out of this camera is definitely an improvement because of the autofocusing, but also in terms of what you can do with it. You can shoot up to 8K now. Yes, there's a crop, 4K, 60, etc. And there's a new user interface for the video, which is something I like, but also it's a little bit challenging at times. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so you have custom profiles for your video, and that Leica kind of gives you a few presets, and then from there you can actually customize them even further. And you get little tabs, it's like kind of a grid, and you can tap on the box respectively. I want to shoot in 8K, Cine 4K, 4K, HD, whatever it is. I want to shoot an MOV, MP4, ProRes. By the way, internally on this for ProRes is only HD, it's not even 4K. I wish that was different, but we'll talk about that later on. And as you're selecting these options, H.265, H.264, sometimes they don't play around with each other all the time. So it's sort of a guessing game, because if you can lock settings in there, say, okay, I only want to shoot an H.265, I'll lock that setting. If you, let's say you want to shoot 4K or 8K, or you want to shoot all I, or whatever case may be, it may not be compatible, and it will say, it'll give you a warning sign, and it will change settings, or it will just kind of leave you guessing. And that's a little bit challenging to use. I did talk to Leica about this and said, maybe you can make this a little bit easier, a little bit more intuitive to tell us what to change versus us having to guess. But it is a very good UI for the most part. It does like to shoot an H.264 primarily. So if you like to shoot in that codec, you're gonna be very, very happy with it. H.265 you can, but it's only 8-bit, not 10-bit. So there are some limitations to the video on this, which I think is, maybe there'll be a firmware update, or maybe this will be for a future SL3S. No confirmation, they didn't say, but they did say the SL2S was very successful for them, so we maybe see that, who knows. But that's something to take note of. What's it like to use? You know, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, I went to Solden, Austria. I was 2,800 meters above sea level at times, sub-0 degree temperature. I took the camera out there, and obviously it's an expensive camera and you want to take care of it. And I'm going up the Snowcat. And, you know, we got photographers with us, we have content creators with us, and they have all different cameras from different manufacturers. And for most part, people would say, I'm not gonna bring a Leica to something like this. Are you crazy? Snow, ice, you know, what are you gonna do? I mean, it's a Leica, you wanna take care of it. I never felt that way with this camera system. It's a tool. And what Leica has done with the SL3 is they have sort of given you this combination of a tool camera that also looks beautiful, very nice to hold, very nice to use, beautiful image quality. We'll talk about that in a second. But you don't have to worry about banging this camera up and it not performing. This camera is built like a tank. They were all built like tanks from the very first SL. And that idea of it being a workhorse of a camera that's a Leica comes into play with this. And I felt great. I used this in the snow and there was no issues with performance whatsoever. Battery life was fine. I never had an issue with the touch display, nothing freezing up, nothing at all. And I was outside shooting, I was in cars, I was doing a lot of stuff with it. And it performed, it was awesome, absolutely awesome. Now, if you want to shoot, you know, 20 frames per second, you can't do it with this camera system. You can do about 5 to 6 frames, and then it drops down to like 12-bit images, and the autofocus goes not to continuous, but to single autofocus. So there are some limitations in that way. I do hope that Leica does kind of bring it up to at least 10 frames per second continuous autofocus with 14-bit. Maybe they can do that in the firmware update, who knows? I still can get the shots that I wanted, and as you've been seeing throughout the video here through sample images. They're great. And then also when we were in Wetzlar, we went to this car museum, beautiful. I think it was one of the largest privately owned car collections in the world. One of ones out there, like Maybach Excelsior or something like that, some crazy cars. And we were able to capture those with the camera system, testing it in low light performance ISO, and it performed great. And that's what we got to talk about, the image quality on this thing. It reminds me of a medium format camera in the sense where it feels like a full frame medium format camera. You've got fantastic dynamic range. This is up to 15 stops of dynamic range. Of course, when you go higher ISO, you're gonna lose a little bit of that, but still, what you're able to pull out of the shadows and the highlights and bring it together, there's a lot of flexibility in these files. And the noise grain on this is actually quite acceptable. I mean, even at 6400, you're gonna see some noise creep in, but it looks more like film grain than it does look like digital noise. So Leica's done a really good job in terms of how it processes the ISO, and I was very, very happy with the results. And by the way, we were not using Oppo lenses in Wetzlar. We were using like these 35 crons, these f2s and the 50 f2s and the 24 to 70 and the 14 to 24. So we didn't even get into the Oppo range of lenses. It performed awesome in video and in photography. It was a joy to use. And that kind of brings me to the point of just what this camera's about. It's a camera that you have to pick up in your hand. It's not a camera that you can look at the specs and go, well, yeah, it's a minor upgrade. It's not really much. But when you get in your hand, you start shooting with it, you actually appreciate some of the nuances, some of the finer details of the camera that do make it special in the marketplace. I mean, it does come at a premium. It does, all Leica cameras do. But Leica has been able to not only give us a camera that performs in a variety of situations beautifully, but also looks the part as well. Now, let's talk about some of the improvements I wish were on this camera system. There's a few of them. First and foremost, there's one new attribute to this camera which I felt was a little bit interesting. They put a time code port on the top of the EVF area here. And I know some people use time code to edit, whatever the case may be, but I would figure this port would be more suited for a video-centric camera than the SL3. Even though the SL3 does do video and it does it relatively well, it was a little bit of an odd option to put time code into a camera system. Do people use time code that much anymore unless they're using cinema cameras? I don't know. I didn't play around with it, but it's something that I noticed and people have talked about it as well. So just watch out for that cap on it. I mean, it doesn't knock off, but it is something that you have to take note of in terms of it coming off. So keep that in mind. Another thing is that the new UI, as good as it is, I do wish it was more customizable, as I mentioned before, is be able to customize what icons I want around the screen to make it my own camera system. Right now, it's sort of Leica's own Leicons, as they call it. And you don't know what the icons mean. There's no sort of tutorial to teach you. Like case in point, there is an icon of a person with a star next to it. And I'm like, what is this? Is it astrophotography? What is this about? And it's actually the profile. So it lets you know that you're shooting in a specific profile. I would never know that unless somebody told me that. And that's how I found out, because I asked somebody at Leica, what's this icon for? Oh, that's for this. And it got me to thinking that perhaps Leica needs to bring out either a video or a guide to teach you what icon means what, because there's a lot of them around there and it can be a little bit confusing. Which brings me to the video portion where I said you have to select the various different icons and it doesn't tell you exactly what's what. I wish there was a little bit more cohesiveness in saying, okay, with H.265, these are your options. You can choose this. That would make more sense. But overall, to wrap up this video, would I recommend you picking up this camera? If you're into autofocusing and you're into more of the modern lenses from Leica or Panasonic or Sigma, yes. It is a much better camera in many ways than the SL2, SL2S respectively. If you're just gonna use the camera for M lenses and you're not gonna use it for autofocusing, do you need to upgrade? I mean, it is a smaller body, so it does make it a little bit easier to carry around with an M lens. So that size and weight difference may be of concern for you, then yes. If not, I would say you probably don't need to upgrade because you're still getting the same 5.76 million dot EVF as you get on the SL2, SL2S, and even the original SL. You do have the flip-up display on this now. Of course, you can adjust the resolution in this just like you can in the Q3 from various different resolutions, but the image quality from 45 megapixel to 60 megapixel, there is a difference. Is it something that you need? I don't know. But for everything else, the SL3 is a very, very impressive camera. And it's something you need to get in your hands to experience and understand. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the Leica SL3. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, more content on the way. Thanks again for the support, and I will chat to you soon.